Got it.
Down.
Okay, good night, everyone. Welcome to the Lesniak Institute in partnership with the Holocaust Resource Center of Kane University for tonight's forum on anti Semitism and hate. Tonight's forum is in response to the recent spike in anti Semitic acts of hate speech and violence in America, New Jersey, and across the globe. How can anyone hate Jews who suffered the loss of 6 million of their faith during the Holocaust? Why do people have that much hate that they attack Jews because they're Jewish, gays because they're gay, Muslims because they're Muslims, Hispanics because they're Hispanics, and the list goes on and on? I don't have the answer to that question, but I do have the solution to combating hate. It's up to every one of us to take a stand and stand up for the other in our communities, our places of worship, our schools. Wherever we see hate, combat it by standing up for the other. Silence is acquiescence in hate. Standing up is taking action against hate. Tonight, we have a powerful lineup of speakers and panelists to discuss how best to combat anti Semitism and hate. Our moderator, Dr. Adar Goldberg. Did I get it right? Very good. Director, Kane University Holocaust Resource Center. At this time, I'd like to introduce you for our opening remarks and welcoming remarks, Kane University President, Dr. Dawud Farahi.
All the good things that needed to be said, Raymond said them. But I want to tell you a little bit about the university and what we do. Our Holocaust Resource Center that was created in 1982 is now a national model and one of the best in the country. It initially was started by a group of people who were Holocaust survivors and made Elizabeth, New Jersey their hometown. Ever since, we have trained over 600 to 700 teachers. We're involved in 72 different school districts trying to make sure that people never forget the Holocaust. I'm not going to give you the statistics of all of the different things that happened, but the fact remains the same. Bigotry, anti-Semitism, and like all other viruses, you can't kill them. The only solution to it, from my perspective, is education. You need to teach people about what happened. There was just less than a week ago, and still continuing in some locations, commemoration of the liberation of Auschwitz. I've been there. And it is one of those things that it doesn't matter where you come from, doesn't matter who you are, and when you see it, you feel what has happened there. When I was at Yad Vashem, of all the different things that you see there, there's a museum of the children. There's one single candle. And you walk around, and that one single candle personifies 1 million children who died. Children who could have discovered cancer, children who could have come up with a solution for energy, children who could have changed the world. Never had a chance. We also have a Human Rights Institute that we created 12 years ago, and we're bringing awareness of human rights issues here at Kane. We're the only university with a Human Rights Institute. And some of the things that we do over there, if it doesn't make you cry, it will touch your heart. I come from Afghanistan as a refugee many years ago in the 70s. Before Iraq and Syria, 1 in 3 of all the refugees on this planet was from my home country. And now we have a million more, again and again. But all of these pale in comparison to the atrocities of an educated people, an educated country, that did to the Jewish people because of their faith, and to the blame that they attached to the Jewish people for something that was absolutely untrue. So you coming here at Kane is a privilege and an honor for us, and I hope you come again and participate in our Holocaust programming and participate in our programming on human rights. And we also have a Da Vinci exhibit going on now for the next 8 weeks in our Liberty Hall Center. Well, a few things about Senator Lesniak. If I didn't say that, I would be in trouble.
I was wondering when you would get there.
Raymond has been a friend for over 30 years. He's an amazing human being, a terrific person. You all know the history of all the things that he has done against prejudice, against hatred for the gay and the lesbian community, and especially on human rights. I went with him to Cannes, France, when he received the International Human Rights Award for legislatively eliminating the death penalty. New Jersey was the first state in the Union to do so. And in addition to that, Raymond now has an institute here at Kane, and we're proud to have him. And he has done a lot of things, including this one. So he doesn't need more introduction from me. He is the introduction himself. Raymond, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ferrari. And now to moderate today's program, Dr. Goldberg.
Excellent. Well, I'd like to begin by thanking Senator Lesniak and Sarah Mack for inviting the Holocaust Resource Center to partner on this important initiative. and also President Farahi for his steadfast support of Holocaust education and anti-racism education, not only in our current climate, but for decades. The Holocaust Resource Center, at the core of what we do is education. And the goal of establishing the Institute was to ensure that all New Jersey students and teachers had access to first-class instruction about the Holocaust and anti-Semitism. Nearly 40 years after our founding, the center is a nationally recognized center, one of only 15 in the country by the Jewish Foundation for the Righteous. And we are the state's foremost repository for survivor and liberator testimonies. We also have a collection of more than 6,000 print resources that are available to all students and members of the community. One of the most important things that we do is manage something called the Diversity Council on Global Education and Citizenship. This is a consortium of more than 80 school districts across the state that are committed to teaching about the Holocaust, genocide, and social justice. A uniquely Kane program that emanates from the Diversity Council is something called a post-baccalaureate certificate. This is an opportunity for New Jersey teachers, no matter the subject they teach, the grade level, or the type of school, to receive tuition-free graduate courses in learning how to effectively teach about the Holocaust and teach about prejudice reduction. By doing this, by participating in these courses, these teachers are being armed with the strategies and tools to proactively respond to bias, discrimination, and ignorance in their own schools and communities. I'm very proud to report that an estimated 3,500 teachers have completed this graduate program in the last 30 plus years, and that there is a 2-year wait list for districts to host the classes. So this is something that we're very proud of. In addition to these courses, the center offers approximately 10 professional development workshops for teachers each year, as well as programs for pre-service teachers and members of the community. This year alone, more than 350 high school students have enrolled and completed our dual credit high school course. This is an elective course on the Holocaust and other genocides. And this should send a very strong message to all of us. All of these programs, everything we do is by choice. Although New Jersey has a mandate to teach about the Holocaust and learn from the lessons of the past, this in no way suggests that this is happening on a day-to-day basis in schools. So we know this, and the message that we walk away from this with is very strong. We know that the teachers and students who engage in these courses, who willingly come to the center, who come to commemorations, who come and join us at programs like this forum, care about anti-Semitism. They care about Holocaust remembrance. They care about social justice. And they have compassion and empathy for the victims of racism, discrimination, and hate-fueled violence. Our students and instructors, some of whom are with us tonight and you'll have an opportunity to hear from as part of the panel, care deeply about humanity and standing up for what is right. And we are terribly proud to have them with us here. These values are shared not only by our educators and students, but also by Dr. Ali Chaudhry, who is the founder of Stand Up for the Other. I would now like to invite Dr. Chaudhry to lead the group in the Stand Up for the Other pledge.
Thank you very much. This pledge that we actually began nearly 5 years ago, March of 2015, is a call for us to act, not to stay silent in the face of hate and bigotry. Because if we stay silent, people assume that you must agree with them. And this is not the time to stay silent. So this pledge, I'm going to ask all of you to join me, a few words at a time, and repeat after me, is a reminder for all of us. And we need to make this, and I'm really delighted to see that there is a partnership between the Lesniak Institute and the Holocaust Center and the movement for the pledge, to make this into a real viral movement so that more and more people in any organization, any congregation can take this up as a challenge and spread the word. So if you would like to join me now, please, if you just repeat after me a few words at a time. The pledge is very simple. It says, while interacting with members of my own faith, or ethnic, or gender community, or with others, if I hear hateful comments from anyone about members of any other community, I pledge to stand up for the other and speak up to challenge bigotry in any form. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Chaudhry. This is something that we look forward to continuing and to engaging our students in this pledge. And hopefully by the end of the year, or the end of next year, we would like to see every Kane student take this pledge.
If I may just acknowledge the leadership that Senator Lesniak and Senator Linda Greenstein, who is one of the panelists today, provided in getting the entire legislature of New Jersey in 2016 to sign this, to endorse this pledge. And I am really very, very thankful for both of them. And now to have our Attorney General join us today, and hopefully we can have the entire state become an example for the rest of the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Senator, and thank you all for having me. And Dr. Farahi, it's an honor to be here at Kane. It's my first visit here, and what a wonderful occasion to take that pledge on this visit. You know, I just want to share a few thoughts. I can't stay, unfortunately, for the entire program. We are no doubt in this moment living through a difficult time in our country's history, and I believe in our state's history. We are seeing today, not just across the country and other places, but in this state, people being targeted for no other reason than the way they look, what they believe, who they love, where they come from. And the numbers that we're seeing at a statewide level trouble me and should trouble you and should trouble everyone. If we look at the numbers, these are reported incidents, and we know these types of crimes are historically underreported. If we look at the numbers in 2017, we had 549 reported incidents of bias and hate in New Jersey. If we go one more year later in 2018, 569. Last year, in 2019, 944 reported incidents of bias and hate in New Jersey. And these incidents take all forms. It includes vandalism, people painting swastikas on school walls, on synagogue walls. It includes people harassing fellow students because of their gender identity. It includes people targeting others with physical assault because of their religion. And I think collectively as a state, we saw one of the most horrific examples of this in Jersey City. We saw anti-Semitism and domestic terrorism and gun violence visit Jersey City. And we saw two domestic terrorists try to strike fear in the heart of New Jersey and this country. And we saw, I think, at once the worst of humanity, but also the best of humanity on that day. We saw law enforcement officers running to danger to save others, putting themselves in harm's way to protect an entire community and protecting people's right to practice their religion, their faith. They didn't care who they were running to protect. They were there to serve their community. And but for their heroism, that could have been a far, far more unimaginable horror that took place on December 10th in Jersey City. And we also saw the best of humanity in some of the experiences that I had, I think, in the wake of that tragedy. We saw people come together. You know, whereas people were trying to divide us as a community in New Jersey and as a state, I saw people come together like we're coming together in this room this evening, to stand shoulder to shoulder with each other, no space between us, regardless of our faiths, where we come from, saying that we won't allow this type of hate to grow in New Jersey. We saw the best of humanity in my experience with the wife, the widow of Douglas Miguel Rodriguez. I met with her the day after he was killed. And before I could even express to her my condolences on the loss of her husband, she told me through a translator, I forgive the people who killed my husband. I forgive them because I don't have room in my heart for hate. I want all of that room in my heart to be filled with love for the memory of my husband, love for my daughter that he left behind. How powerful was that? I saw the best of humanity when I visited a week later the Jersey City Kosher Supermarket with a number of officials, and the colonel of the state police and I were standing with a group of elected leaders who wanted to see the site and law enforcement officials. And as we stood there, our eyes were drawn to the small yeshiva that was next door. And we looked up at the window there, right next to the kosher supermarket, one floor up, one building over. And we saw a lot of young, smiling Jewish boys waving to us and smiling and just laughing a week later. And so the colonel and I decided to walk over there. And we were led into that building. We walked up the narrow staircase, and we met with Rabbi Roth, who ran that school. And we asked him if we could talk to the young children to see how they were doing. And he told us about how resilient they've been over the last week and how an entire community came together to support them. And so he said, yeah, sure, please come on in. And we walked into that room, and as soon as the door opened, and this is one of the most powerful memories I've had in this current role, as soon as that door opened, every one of those young boys got up and started applauding, started clapping. And they were from 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, really young children. And they weren't clapping for me. They were clapping for the colonel in the uniform that he was wearing. They were clapping for all the first responders who showed up that day to save them, to protect them. They were clapping for those first responders who stood up next to them in that school for days after that event to make sure that they were safe going to school, practicing their faith. And so what I saw in that room were dozens and dozens of tiny little miracles that we need to keep in our mind, that we owe it to them to do everything we can to fight hate, bias, discrimination, anti-Semitism in this state. But it wasn't just them. When I looked across the street, there was another school there. And that gunfight raged for hours right underneath that school in front of another school. And I thought about all the miracles that were in that school as well. Again, it could have been a far, far more unimaginable tragedy on that day. And so it's those experiences in the days after that event and the weeks and now the month that's passed that have caused me to think long and hard about what we should be doing as a state to push back these numbers that I talked about, to push back this tide of hate and intolerance that we're seeing, to push back against anti-Semitism in the state. And what I've come up with, from my perspective, from Prosecutor Rotolo's here, from the law enforcement perspective, from the Homeland Security perspective, there are certainly things we need to do from an enforcement perspective. And we will continue to do that. Those who perpetrate this type of horror in our communities and who act out with physical violence and engage in domestic terrorism, we will use all the resources and the tools at our disposal to investigate those cases and to hold the people responsible accountable. But we also have to use those enforcement tools that we have at the Attorney General's office to hold others accountable as well. And when I say others, I talk about the social media companies. We have powerful tools at the Attorney General's office, powerful, powerful tools. And we have to demand more of these companies who give quarter to people to engage in this type of hateful rhetoric online. And I'm not talking about criminalizing speech. There is a fine line. But the algorithms and the other tools that these social media companies use to push people who are like-minded together and allow them to find community and give them space in which to share these types of ideologies and to grow their own movements, well, they need to do more to monitor their own platforms. And so we are engaging in robust dialogue with those social media companies about how they should be doing more. We are engaging in robust dialogue with our partner attorneys general to see how we could demand more of these social media platforms. They use those algorithms to monetize their platforms. But the byproduct is they're letting these folks find community. They're letting them engage in this hateful ideology and let it be normalized. And so we need to demand more of them. The third thing from an enforcement perspective that we have to do in this state is we have to do, as you were mentioning earlier, more in our schools. And what I'm talking about is those numbers that I mentioned earlier. One of the most alarming trends and through lines through all those years of data is that each year, more and more of the known offenders are younger people. And more of these acts are taking place on school campuses, high school campuses, and college campuses. And so, in my mind, we have to do a better job as prosecutors when we have incidents in our schools, that those station house adjustments where we say it's just kids being kids, don't do it again, that is not enough. And so it's incumbent on me to revisit our station house adjustment policies, to say that an act of anti-Semitism in a school when a child paints a swastika on a wall is not met with a slap on the wrist and a promise never to do it again. We need to go into that school because that act is symptomatic sometimes of something bigger going on in that community. And so we have to meet it with education. We have to meet it with school assemblies and discussions. The same way when there's an incident of sexting in our schools. Parents are notified, school assemblies are held, students are warned about the dangers of engaging in this type of conduct and how it could lead them down a criminal path. And when it comes to education, another thing that we need to do in this state is work with our Department of Education to make sure that we are doing more in our schools to root out this type of behavior. You know, we give all of our children great tools so they could pass their standardized tests and they hit all their marks in math and science and reading, and they could, you know, meet the criteria to move on to the next grade. What about teaching them to be good, kind human beings? To be accepting human beings? It's got to be more than tolerance. What about requiring that type of discussion in our schools? Returning to the type of civics that we need right now. And that's got to be a part of it. But the last thing, and I think probably the most important thing, is what we're doing tonight, which is treating an act of hate through this pledge against any one of our communities as an act of hate against all of our communities, promising that we are going to call it out when we see it. We're going to demand more of our elected officials when they engage in this type of conduct. We're not going to tolerate it. We're not going to tolerate it in our public discourse, in our private discourse, and even online. Even online. We need to call it out wherever we see it. And this pledge is the perfect way for all of us to show our shared commitment to this cause. And that's what it's going to require, because I don't want to see these numbers continuing to increase. And unfortunately, what I'm seeing in 2020, we're not off to a good start. And so rather than blaming others and pointing fingers at the causes, I'd rather come up with solutions. And those are some of the thoughts that we have and some of the things that we're working on at the Attorney General's office. But again, this shared commitment, this pledge, has to be the foundation of what we do moving forward. So thank you, Senator, for bringing us together. I apologize that I can't stay on my parental duties call tonight, and so I have to exit right now, but thank you so much. General. Thanks.
Thank you, General. Big hand for General Gurugara. And I just butchered your name, General. I'm sorry. I just butchered your name. I'm sure I'm not the only one. That was a very compelling and moving speech, and I want to thank you for all the service that you're giving to the people of the state of New Jersey. Dr. Goldberg?
Thank you, Attorney General. It's very important for all of us to hear about the commitment of your office and of your colleagues to combating hate moving forward. So thank you. It's my pleasure to now, oh, there's the mic. To now begin our panel discussion. What I'm going to do is invite each panelist to speak for approximately 7 to 8 minutes each. There will be an opportunity for discussion and questions after the panelists are finished, so I would ask you to please write down any questions or comments so that we can get through everybody first. A reminder to all of the panelists, please keep your mics turned off unless you are speaking, or we'll have a terrible echo in the room. So the first person that I'd like to invite for our panel is Jared Maples, who is the Director of the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness, to share more about what his office is doing to combat bigotry.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I think it's appropriate, given the topic of tonight, that we start off by saying shalom. It is appropriate to give a response. So you can fire away. Shalom. So that word means a lot. It's meant a lot over the last couple months. The Attorney General referenced Jersey City and the shooting there, and we've spoken to a lot of Jewish groups, Jewish citizens across the state, all 21 counties since that event. And I will tell you that we spent a lot of time before that event as well, engaging with the interfaith community at large. Dr. Chaudhry, amongst others here in the room, are key members of our Interfaith Advisory Council, which is 3,500 members of interfaith across the state of New Jersey. It's the largest one of its kind in the United States. It represents every single faith group in the state of New Jersey, and we have direct access to the leadership elements of all those. If anyone's interested in learning more about it, it's on our website at www.njhomelandsecurity.gov, and there's an interfaith tab there. Included, everything I'm going to talk about tonight is in that on that tab regarding our interfaith outreach and support to the community. But shalom also means a couple different things. It means peace. It also means completeness, if you're familiar with the word itself. And it did strike me as I walked in here to the round table that it's a completeness. It's completing the circle. Another thing that as I sat down, I thought about was traditionally, in literature, one of the first references to a round table is about knights. I think everybody knows the Knights of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. But it did strike me as I walked into the room that perhaps we're knights, everyone around the room, about social justice. It's interesting and poignant that we talked about the pledge, something that I proudly pledged when I first became director 3 years ago. And it did strike me that we're knights, and everyone around the table and everyone around the room are here to combat hate, to combat anti-Semitism, to combat hate against all faiths, so that all faiths can be free to pray in peace in the way that they choose. One of my goals and certainly one of my roles in New Jersey. I should also mention a couple of things. One is my deputy director, Drew Campy, is here with me as well. We stole him from the FBI, retired from the FBI. In our role, we're responsible for leading and coordinating the state's counterterrorism, cybersecurity, and emergency preparedness efforts. But over time, we've become heavily engaged in interfaith outreach because of incidents like Jersey City, unfortunately. I wish Homeland Security did not have as much of a place as we do in this conversation, but we have a very big piece of this puzzle right now in protecting our houses of worship and our houses of faith. And I also would be remiss if I didn't point out the prosecutor, Lindsay Rotolo, and how great she's been in her role in Union County in a short time, has done a lot of work in securing houses of worship and being a partner to us at the state level. So I'll lead into my comments and say, as a member of the governor's cabinet, I speak for the governor, I speak for our partners, certainly Attorney General's office, state police, et cetera, that there is no place for hate in New Jersey. The Attorney General obviously spoke very eloquently about this, and he's a tough act to follow. But we are united in that goal. We're united in that front. There is no question from the governor through the entire cabinet that there is no place for hate in New Jersey. So I think that needs to be said, and it's an important part of this problem. It can't be said enough from a leadership perspective, and it becomes not just saying; it also becomes doing. I want to talk about a couple of my personal experiences in this area. My professional life, I spent most of my career at the CIA. That's not the Culinary Institute of America, it's the other one. But I was not a spy. A lot of people always ask that. I was a protective agent. I protected spies and anybody else that needed to be protected. I can't get into all the details, but a lot of people need to be protected in the world. So I bring that to the table from my personal experience, and it's about protecting. That's what we do in Homeland Security. And again, it really is everyone. It's every resident and visitor of New Jersey, every faith, every denomination, every group that needs to be protected. That's what we're here for, and it's important, and it really was stated well in the pledge, and that's why we adhere to that, certainly from my office. But in that role, I got to go to Auschwitz, and that was an incredibly impactful moment in my life. You don't normally think of that piece, but one of our protectees went there. And I can tell you that there's a handful of places in the world that I've been. A couple of them, unfortunately, have been in Afghanistan, Mr. President, that I've felt evil present. And Auschwitz is certainly one of the places that I felt that. And it really did have an impact on me. And the second personal experience that I've had to true anti-Semitism is at Yad Vashem. So I was particularly pleased to hear you bring that piece up. And if you've ever had a chance to visit there, the country, it's in Israel, outside of Jerusalem, that exposure is incredibly impactful. And again, I don't care what denomination, what background, what culture, what religion you come from. If you're not impacted by that, then there's probably something the matter. You need to be. We need to be cognizant of what happened, the atrocities that happened. You talk about 1 million children, and when you walk in, the candle's lit, but there's mirrors everywhere, and they're all reflective. So you walk in, and it hits you every turn, every corner that you make. And that wasn't really a corner, it's round, but in that children's exhibit as well. And I couldn't agree more with you. Of all the exhibits, I think there's 17 buildings, give or take, in that compound. That's really one of the ones, I mean, they're all impactful, but that one was a dramatic. So I want to bring that up because our personal experiences have to be part of this. Our personal understanding of what happened to the Jewish people in the 30s and 40s, but then also throughout history are important, and we need to combat that together. And again, that's the Knights of the Round Table. So I'm not sure I can actually anoint anybody, but if I had a sword in my hand, I suppose I would. From the New Jersey perspective of Homeland Security, one of the things we talk about, words are important. It's important for me to say there is no place for hate in New Jersey. It's vital. It's important for the Attorney General, for the Governor, for Colonel Callahan, for all of our partners to say that. But what's most important is what we do about it, and that becomes vital to how we interact. So in New Jersey Homeland Security, we focus on a couple things. I mentioned the Interfaith Advisory Council. It's vital to what we do. We have that incredible interaction, and when a member of the Muslim community has an issue with the Jewish community or with law enforcement, federal, state, and local, we're all there. And there's a button point for all of us to turn to when there's an issue. And what that does is it alleviates hate because we can get a common understanding together at one time and have the points to go to, because there's disagreements amongst every one of us, right? Everyone has disagreements. But when it turns into hate, because of who you are or what you believe in or how you practice your life, that's when it becomes wrong. So we try to jump ahead of that and get ahead of those issues in New Jersey before they become hate. Well before. And a matter of fact, it turns into actually strong bonds of trust and friendship, and that's what we focus on. The other side is grant funding. I mentioned at the beginning that I wish Homeland Security was not playing such a big role in the faith-based community, but we are. We have a tax, and I can go down the list of far too many. One that came right to our doorstep in Jersey City, Poway, California, Pittsburgh, Texas. I mean, I can go down the list of all these incidents of hate and violence that happen, and we're involved. And so what we try to do about it is get ahead of the problem. We talk about being first preventers versus just first responders. We have to be responders. We have to be able to be resilient and overcome and help peoples and communities through incidents when they happen, but we really try to prevent those. We do them in a couple different ways, one of which is grant funding. So the federal government dedicates millions of dollars of federal grant funding. We are number 2 in the country, almost year over year in New Jersey, in getting that federal aid. The state has also developed over the last several years a nonprofit grant program as well from the state side. It's in the millions every single year. It's actually it's over 10 million, and it'll be, I think, well over that this year with the unfortunate events that have happened in the past calendar year. But those dollars go to cameras and locks and alarms, and they go to security guards. And again, boy, do I wish, because the common theme we hear from all of our interfaith partners is we want our doors to be open. That's the whole goal of our faith-based partners, is to be open and help people heal and help people grow as humans. And it's a strange dichotomy, isn't it? So we try to work, again, hand in hand with our faith-based community to make sure those programs are hitting home in the right way and protecting the cultures and the flocks and the religions in a way that they can still practice and be free to do so. It becomes important to what we do. And the other side is suspicious activity reporting. It's important to any conversation like this. I cannot state enough how important it is that the community let us know that there's an issue. You're the first people that are going to know this. Prosecutor Rotolo, certainly her office has been fantastic in dealing with our suspicious activity reporting and making sure the state's aware of these, because our resources are vast. We can connect directly into the FBI. It's one of the great reasons that Drew decided to come on board, so he can continue his work in combating these problems, this scourge of hate. But those suspicious activity reportings, the system it's called, the SARS system, in New Jersey, we're different for a lot of reasons. Some good, some bad, but mostly good. And this is one of them. We are able to get ahead of problems before they become attacks often. Not every time. There's no way to stop every one of these. But it's because of the community's reporting. When you see an issue in your synagogue or in your temple, in your mosque, in your church, we need to know about it. And we'll deal with that in a way that is respectful of everyone's rights. Most often they turn out to not be an attack or a hate-based incident. But often they are. And we work, again, with our county partners and the state police, et cetera, and we try to get out ahead of those problems and make those arrests, pull people off the street when they need to be taken off the street before they become attacks. So it's not a part of a conversation from my perspective unless we talk about that, and that's where the community comes into play. Again, we'll do that with respect to everyone's rights, and we'll try to do it as quietly as we can so nobody's scared about coming to your service. But we need to have an idea of what's going on out there, and that happens at the local level. It's been tried and true. It's time and time again that the local level, at the church, at the synagogue, at the temple, at the mosque, you're the ones that are seeing the problems. You know what seems off. If somebody's lingering or taking video or asking too many questions that don't seem right, they may not seem to fit in. We need to know about that, and it's all behavioral based. People ask all the time about suspicious activity reporting. Well, doesn't it profile? The answer is it's not a profile on look. I really don't care what someone looks like. I care about what they do, what their behaviors are, how they're acting. That's what means something. If I go down the list of people that have committed acts of hate, most often they haven't been reported because people say they don't, quote, look like what they think they should look like. So I don't care about what they look like. I care about what they do and how they do it. And that becomes important to what we're trying to stop in New Jersey. So I bring all those pieces up because it is about action, and we are doing a lot of action in New Jersey. We're going to continue. We're going to double down on that. Jersey City was a wake-up call for many. Unfortunately, it's something we've been living, and certainly in my role, every single day I see hate. That's my job. I deal with it. Our staff, the Deputy Director Campy, the prosecutor, we deal with hate. That's unfortunately the role that we play in society. But we also see hope and love. And you see it in rooms like this. I see head nods. I see people understanding. I see people coming together. And I see the Knights of the Round Table uniting to combat this hate. So I thank you very much for your partnership. Senator, it's a true honor to be here. It means a lot. Senator Greenstein, you've been a fantastic partner as well. I don't want to leave you out of this. In your role, certainly has been fantastic, and we very much appreciate it. Mr. President, thank you for hosting us. And Dara, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Jared. There was something that you said that really stood out to me, and I think it perfectly encapsulates what we're all doing today. You said that the goal of your office is to not only be first responders, but first preventers, and I think that's what we're all doing collectively right now. So thank you for sharing that. I would now like to welcome Senator Linda Greenstein, who is a member of the New Jersey State Senate in District 14, to please share.
Thank you. I've been taking notes on different things, and they're just totally diverse and eclectic, so I'll try to go through them. I want to start by thanking Senator Lesniak, who truly has been one of the most effective senators, and now that he's taking on this area, I think he has taken this area on for many years, but it feels good to have him involved in this because we're going to get some good answers. And I want to thank the President as well as our Attorney General and the Homeland Security Department, because I always feel like we're in very good hands with these people. They're doing a lot. And we're always trying to think of what we can do legislatively, which I'll just get to in a minute. I just was sitting here and thinking, as a Jewish person, what has been my experience? And I'm sure that everybody would have different experiences. I'm happy to say that, at least openly, I haven't experienced a whole lot of anti-Semitism. I've done a lot of different things in my life, and the only thing I remember is people yelling bad things at me in my neighborhood. And for some reason, I always took the position that I was going to fight back, but then I would pray not to have to. I used to pray, please let an adult show up. And they did, and then I didn't have to fight. But I always stood up whenever somebody was calling me names. I always said, okay, let's fight, let's do it. But that was Brooklyn. Okay, I don't know if it's like that in New Jersey. So anyway, I really didn't face it that much myself, but one of the many jobs I've had is, for a couple of years in the early 90s, I worked at the Anti-Defamation League, and I really experienced a lot right in New York City. I guess it's next door, or was next door to the UN at the time, and they did everything from bring in Ku Klux Klan members. We had to debrief them because they went undercover. All kinds of work like that, and certainly I found it very intriguing. It was definitely a very interesting job to see the horrible things that are going on and the things that people write. I still have copies of many of the books. They were amazing and frightening, and many of them were the basis for a lot of the anti-Semitic groups that are all over the country. And it really opened my eyes because at the time, I can't remember if I lived in New Jersey. I guess I did live in New Jersey at that time. And I found out that New Jersey has had many of these anti-Semitic groups, possibly more than many of the other states. And I'm always intrigued with all of that. So it's out there, even if it isn't all that visible. We held a hearing not too long ago on bias crimes. It was my committee, which is the Law and Public Safety Committee, as well as the Homeland Security Committee. And this is the transcript of it. So we had lots of speakers, including people from Homeland Security, the Attorney Generals, you name it. And I found the most interesting thing, one of the things that the Attorney General talked about, which is what is going on social media. And we had a specialist there who talked about it, and it is truly frightening. When you see the way codes are used, so if any of us went onto these sites, we wouldn't even understand what was going on, but the bigots understand it. They use abbreviations, they use codes. We had quite an education on what is going on there, so I'm very glad to hear that the Attorney General's office is working on this issue. If anything is needed legislatively, we certainly want to be involved in that because it is truly the biggest problem we have right now. The old forms of anti-Semitism and hatred pale in comparison to what's going on with social media right now. And that's where I think the dangers are. That, for example, the person who did the killing in Pittsburgh was influenced by social media sites, and I imagine many of the other people are. So that's something that we definitely have to continue to work on. Now, another thing I wanted to talk about is Dr. Chaudhry's pledge, and I think Senator Lesniak and I were probably two of the first to take it a number of years ago, and I've said it many times since. When you say it, it's extremely simple. You know, it sounds like, yeah, I can agree with that. But it's so important. As a matter of fact, Dr. Chaudhry and I are a member of one of the interfaith Jewish Muslim groups that's run by the American Jewish Committee, I think. And one of the things that stood out in my mind at one of the meetings was the way the group tries to stand up for each other. That truly had an effect on me. We were talking about a situation in Trenton where a couple of the Trenton Council people made all kinds of anti-Semitic comments and refused to back down. And we were talking about writing a letter and how we were going to deal with it. And the part of that whole discussion that stuck in my mind was we were in a mosque having the meeting, and one of the Muslim men, I can't remember his name, but he's one of the members of the group, said something like, well, what do we do next? What do we do now? And it kind of reminded me of movies I've seen with, you know, you might see a little group of one of the Israeli groups like the Haganah or the Palmach, and everybody is sitting there and going, what do we do now? And it was we. What do we do now? That was the part that stuck with me, that he saw it as we, that it was our problem. it moves me. And and that is how the people are. And another thing that happened to me after that, it might have been the same man actually. We were at an event at one of the mosques, and they did a little game kind of where everybody had to talk about how they felt about different things and about each other. And he said something along the lines of, so if somebody says anti-Semitic comments to me, I say things to them like, well, I know Linda Greenstein, and she's not like that. And, you know, it's things like that. It's personal relationships. It's communicating. It's the idea of people feeling like someone else's problems are their problems. I mean, that's really what I get from all the different groups that I'm involved in and the people I know. That's what I really see. And that's, I think, one of the small ways that things can change. I think that's most of, I guess the other thing I'd say is this big hearing we had with many different speakers from all over the state, some of the most prominent in all these areas. There were no simple solutions. Certainly education was important. Certainly, as the general said, we have to deal with the social media. But one of my somewhat disappointments is that I came away from our several-hour hearing thinking, yeah, I'm not sure what we're supposed to do next. There's just no magic answers. You can't just put in a bill and make it all go away. A lot of it is just people getting to know each other and doing it one by one. We almost don't have time for that because this problem has become so bad. And not to really get political, because I don't know everybody's leanings in here, but it certainly did get a lot worse after the election of President Trump. That really was a turning point. Everybody in this area seems to feel that way. They feel that they saw a great change, and I think it was simply because it seemed to make it okay for people to talk the way they talk and to feel this way and to be open about it. And I don't believe it was that way before. It's not that people didn't have bad feelings and bigoted and biased feelings. It's just that they didn't feel as comfortable coming out with them. For whatever reason, they're emboldened now, and they do it. And we just have to do whatever we can and whatever feels right to us to fight back. We'll do anything we can legislatively, but as I say, no magic answers to these problems. But anyway, thank you for having us here today. And, you know, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Senator. I'd just like to remind all the panelists to please try to keep your remarks to about 7-8 minutes, just so we can ensure that we have time for questions and discussion. The next person that I would like to introduce is Joshua Cohen, who is the Director of Government Relations and External Affairs for the Jewish Federations of New Jersey.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Kane University and the Lesniak Institute for hosting this important forum on anti-Semitism and bringing in a rich, diverse array of experts to speak to this topic, as well as having members of the school and the wider community being here as well. It's an important message that we send to the entire community. And like Senator Greenstein, I also used to work for the ADL at one point in my life. You know, it's interesting, I just said it was a pleasure to be here, but it's kind of weird saying that it's a pleasure to be here, right? Because we're here to talk about like the oldest hatred in the world, anti-Semitism. We shouldn't have to be here. You know, I think that the pledge is this beautiful, wonderful thing that Dr. Chaudhry has created, and this momentum that we built in the state. But we're in the year 2020, and we still have to remind people to take these pledges. And you know, it's a reminder of the great work that has been done but still needs to be done. So here we are together discussing anti-Semitism, the world's oldest hatred, in the context of increased incidents and communal responses. And it's really interesting because over the last century in the United States, the fundamental conditions for Jewish people in this country has increased, significantly changed for the better. You know, doors that were once shut for like my grandparents or my great-grandparents are now open. And the community is experiencing an unprecedented level of privilege and access like they've never experienced before. You know, and over time, you know, the community learned to become more vigilant, to monitor, to speak out and to fight back, and did a fantastic job at delegitimizing hate speech and able to push anti-Semitism to the fringe of American society and culture. but with the understanding that anti-Semitism is not a historical phenomenon and it's not something that we do not see anymore. Hate crime data, stories we see on the news, stories we read in the papers or we see on our social media feeds detail horrific attacks against the Jewish community, and that demonstrates that not only are hate-related incidents targeting Jews increasing, but they're getting more violent. And even though recent polling data shows that the percentage of anti-Semitic attitudes in this country is lower than it was a half century ago, there's still a significant share of Americans that subscribe to harmful stereotypes about Jews. And that share, I mean, the percentage of Americans that hold anti-Semitic attitudes, if you look at the percentage, it represents like 28 million people in this country hold at least one or more anti-Semitic attitudes. And the recent uptick in anti-Semitic incidents suggests that more of these individuals may be willing to act on their anti-Semitic animus. As long as these stereotypes persist in our society, they create a pool of individuals who may be emboldened to act out on their hatred. So then how do we unpack this moment in time when anti-Semitism in America is in the headlines in a way that it's usually not? I mean, it's been in the headlines for, I'd say the past 3 years in a way that it's really not. And for a variety of reasons, which we'll probably discuss later and unpack, the Pandora's box of anti-Semitism is wide open these days. And it's going to take a sustained effort from the highest levels of government all the way to the individual citizen to shut it closed. And while we take on the challenge of anti-Semitism directly, it's essential to recognize that for both positive and negative reasons, we're not alone. Reports of hate crimes and hate incidents have risen significantly, and while the number of attacks on Jewish people and institutions has been unprecedented, we cannot forget that we're not alone. Many of our friends, neighbors, family in the Muslim, African American, Latino, LGBTQ community have also been targeted as well. And at the same time, we're not alone because the outpouring of support and sympathy has been overwhelming. Christian, Muslim, African American, Latino, LGBTQ leaders and ordinary citizens have spoken out, reached out, showed up to express their revulsion for these heinous actions and their solidarity with the Jewish community. Government officials have denounced attacks. They've called for more protections, increased security funding to protect religious communities and nonprofit organizations, introduced legislation to combat anti-Semitism, hate, and bigotry. And in New Jersey, we witnessed elected leaders at all levels joining together to condemn acts that target the Jewish community and offering solutions to keep communities safe and secure. Public statements and events like these demonstrate that combating anti-Semitism, hate, and bigotry is really a nonpartisan issue. And law enforcement, from the local to the national level, treat incidents with the utmost seriousness. Recently, our Attorney General brought together a working group of state agencies and professionals to directly address the problems of bias crimes that are being perpetrated by our youth. Additionally, the Office of Homeland Security, in partnership with the state police, have increased outreach and engagement efforts. They work directly with houses of worship, with faith-based institutions, with community centers throughout the state, building those necessary relationships and alliances. So we're not alone, and it's incumbent upon us to make sure that our neighbors who are targeted know that we stand with them as well. As a community and as a country, we must join together with our neighbors, with the beautiful diversity out of which our unity is formed, to respond with a resounding no to the violence and hatred and division. Now, as Jews, we have an obligation and a right to protect ourselves, our children, and our institutions from those who wish to harm us. We do this because it's in our own interest, but also it demonstrates that neither the Jewish community nor anyone else should accept this current state of affairs. And our fate is tied to that of every other group in this state and in this country, all of those who are marginalized, demonized, and told that they do not belong. Anti-Semitism is not just a Jewish problem, it is an American problem. And we should extend our hands and our voices and our political power to reclaim that moral high ground and to show ourselves and the world what truly makes America great. And we've learned the hard way that we simply cannot ignore the cancer of bigotry and hatred, of racism, of anti-Semitism. We are concerned, at least I'm concerned, that the current state of affairs and the incidents that we see are causing a fatigue. There's this whiplash that we're having of constantly event after event. And it's fatiguing, and it drains and it draws on the community. But if we ignore it and we retreat into our comfortable cocoons, we will do so at our own peril. Anti-Semitism, hate, and bigotry cannot be wiped out unless each and every one of us confronts it with our own circles of family and friends. Silence is consent, and it really takes courage to stand up for the other. Now, I agree, and I think we would all agree, that the struggle against hate is not easy. It can't be accomplished through short-term measures, but rather it's going to be effective action that requires a long-term commitment of energy, of resources, of passion, and collaboration. And that way, together, we can push back against this scourge of hate. But we have to take that courageous first step, and we have to do it together and stand up for the other. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I would now like to invite Rabbi Robert Green of Congregation Sons of Israel to speak.
Thank you, Dr. Goldberg. And thank you to everyone who is here partaking in this forum, and for all who put it together. It's heartening to know that people are gathering and thinking about these important issues as a community, as a broad community. In Judaism, the most precious book we have is called the Torah. It's our narrative, among other things. It tells us how we got to where we are today. And one of the foundation stories in our Torah is that we were slaves in the land of Egypt, and God rescued us with an outstretched arm. God rescued us with the help of Moses. And then Moses escorted us, took us to Mount Sinai, where we accepted the mitzvot, the commandments that tell us how we should be living our lives. Why is the foundation story important to us, that we were slaves in Egypt? And it's so important that each year on Pesach, when we have our seders, we say, when we were slaves in the land of Egypt, not when our ancestors were slaves in the land of Egypt. Why is that so important? Because if we see ourselves as having been slaves, then we have a better understanding of what it's like to be slaves. And if we have a better understanding, then we know two things. We know that we don't ever want to have that happen to us again. It should never happen to us again. We also know that it should never happen to anyone again. No one should have that experience. So because we understand ourselves as having had this experience in the first person, we know that it's our obligation to do whatever we can to keep other people from having that experience, as well as to keep ourselves from having it again. The mitzvot, the commandments that we accepted when we were on Sinai, are the instructions that tell us how to live our lives so that we can be in that position of never having to have anyone be in slavery again. There are a lot of commandments. There are 613. There's a story that a rabbi, a sage rabbi of the first century before the Common Era, Rabbi Hillel, was asked if he could teach the entire Torah while standing on one foot. And so what he said was, that which you find abhorrent, you should not do to your fellow. That which you don't want done to you, you should not do to other people. In other words, treat other people the way you'd like other people to treat you. Later on, that became the golden rule. I believe it's in the New Testament as well. It's a very powerful statement, but it's the kernel of everything that we believe and that we believe we need to do as a Jewish people, right in the foundation, right in the core of our Torah. So how do we do the work of creating a world in which people treat other people in the same way that they'd like to be treated? we become engaged not just in the issues that are important to our own groups. We become engaged in issues that are important to the groups of all of our brothers and sisters. We reach beyond our own boundaries. We reach beyond the boundaries of religion, of gender identity, of sexual orientation, of national identity, of socioeconomic levels. We create understanding by doing this. We become first preventers. Did somebody say first preventers? Thank you very much. I loved that. Because when we understand those who are around us and they understand us, we then lose our reason for mistrust. And by understanding, we prevent some of what's happening from happening. God willing, we prevent it from happening. I want to leave you with a poem that was very powerful to me. It was written by Rabbi Michael Adam Latz as a response to Pastor Martin Niemöller's poem, which was itself written in response to the Shoah. It's the poem that said, "First they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist." And the final line is, "Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." So what Rabbi Latz writes in response to that, he says, first, "I wondered why on earth I was waiting for someone else. In human rights advocacy, one person rising up, speaking out, taking action can make a difference." And his reply to Pastor Niemöller, of blessed memory, is this: "First they came for the African Americans, and I spoke up, because I am my sister's and my brother's keeper. And then they came for the women, and I spoke up, because women hold up half the sky. And then they came for the immigrants, and I spoke up, because I remember the ideals of our democracy. And then they came for the Muslims, and I spoke up, because they are my cousins, and we are one human family. And then they came for the Native Americans, and Mother Earth and I spoke up, because the blood-soaked land cries and the mountains weep. They keep coming, we keep rising up, because we Jews know the cost of silence." Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi, for sharing that. I'd now like to introduce Alicia DeLorenzo, the Interim Deputy Director of Garden State Equality.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for the invitation, Senator Lesniak and President and the Lesniak Institute. What an amazing opportunity for us to come together, right? Because when we think about the hate that's filling our communities and filling our country, we have to think about the proximity of where we are when these things happen. The further the distance between us, the easier it is to hate. The closer we come together, the more connected we are, the harder it is to look in your eyes and hate. I'm reminded of a South African Zulu greeting: "I see you, and I am here." When we first think of these 6 words, very much like the pledge, it's simple but profound. Because to declare "I see you" means much more than you showed up tonight, thanks, there you are, your glasses look great. To declare "I see you" means I'm willing to drop my preconceptions about you. I'm willing to drop my judgments, my biases, my stories, the narrative that I have and hold about you. To then proclaim that I am here is much more than "here I am." To declare that I'm here speaks to the essence of inhabiting this moment with the intention to drop my mask, to drop my armor, to show up and be seen in all of my humanity, my darkness and my light, my strengths and my weaknesses. And so when we think about this greeting, we think about the suffering that we endure on our own journeys to have who we are be seen in all of our greatness and all of our weakness. And so one of the things I think that's so vital to this conversation is that not only are we out there in the world promoting and talking the talk, but are we willing to be that vulnerable, to be seen and to see others in this light? And so I ask that, like the way that we took this pledge, we embody the essence of connection, coming from we are connected. Like if you all closed your eyes right now and thought about the people in your lives who gave you the opportunity to mess up and to show up all that you are, ultimately what resonates is this sense of love, right? This sense of connectedness. And so what if we looked each other in the eyes? Like, could we turn to each other and really look eye to eye and heart to heart and say, I see you, and declare that we're here? Because this starts with us embodying this in our language. It starts with us embodying this in our actions. Because hate comes in many forms. It doesn't just come in the catastrophic actions of death and destruction. It comes in the destruction of our looks and our words and our posture to another. Consider unpacking the cycle of prejudice, starting with our conditioning, the messages and the mental diets that we have digested about what we think of the other or the otherness of folks, and how that leads to our thoughts and expectations about people. What do I think about this group or that group, or what you practice, what you believe in, who you love? And then leading up to deliberately avoiding people based on these beliefs that stemmed from this conditioning. And moving from not only then deliberately avoiding, but causing harm and rising to the level that we've seen throughout history with the Holocaust. How many decades past the Holocaust are we? And yet I'm reminded of the quote by Anne Frank in her diary. It says, terrible things are happening. Families are being torn apart. Children are coming home and their parents are gone. And yet we see this happening today. We think about our immigrant population and the experiences of young kids coming home and parents aren't there, and the fear that's instilled in them. And what I'm hearing across everyone's dialogue and discourse is this common thread of compassion. How do we create cultures of connection where we're able to embody this compassion for others? So when I think about the feedback that we get for rolling out an LGBTQ curriculum across the state and the vile and vitriolic comments that we hear about indoctrinating our children, I worry about the vile and vitriolic comments and dialogue that we are providing our children around our dinner tables or around our homes about others. When I was interviewed about the LGBTQ curriculum, the newscaster asked me, well, can't you understand that parents are concerned about bringing this type of curriculum into schools? Can't you understand that they want to know about it first? And I said, yeah, I could understand parents' desire to want to know about the content of the curriculum first. But I'd hope that they're not depending on schools to be the first place to have these conversations about other cultures and other people and other abled or disabled bodies. I hope that these conversations are happening around dinner tables and before tucking our children into bed, when we talk about, yeah, some people have feet and legs, and some people have wheels that they move around on. And we make these conversations part of how we're communicating with our children. And I think that there is great opportunity for us to reach our children. But I think before we even get to our children, we have to get to us. We have to be willing to embody what we want to see in our children. And there's a couple prongs to that, right? There's what does our pre-service education look like? How are we training educators on things like the cycle of prejudice and how our conditioning impacts how we treat others? How is our pre-service education for law enforcement, right? Providing them opportunities to explore these experiences and the conditionings that they've received. How do we start at a level of before people are in the field and before people are in the service of others, that we start to educate, but really the education comes from us first. And so I don't know that I'll say anything else more profound than the folks around the room, but I invite us all to start to consider cultures of connection and creating these cultures of being seen. Because when we think about, too, just a couple comments about the curriculums that we have in place in school, what benefit is a curriculum if it sits on a shelf, right? How do we make sure that not only LGBTQ curriculum, but Amistad curriculum and Holocaust curriculum are easily accessible? One of the things we're working on is to create one foundation where we can resource these things and not have to look in 100 different pockets to find it, right? So making it more universal. Because if our youth cannot see themselves, going back to the greeting, if I'm not seen, therefore I don't exist. So lifting up the contributions, political, economic, social, of Jewish folks and folks of color and LGBTQ folks allows kids the opportunity to say, I can see myself there. I can see myself in the Attorney General. I can see myself as the Commissioner of Education. I'm seen, and therefore I exist. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those remarks. One thing that I'm going to toot the horn of the Diversity Council right now is that some of these topics are ones that have been considered for decades now. And we've worked with Garden State Equality on our LGBTQ panel. And this year we're very excited that we have two of the educators who are working on the new curriculum coming to unroll that with our group, as well as a program on the disability mandate, disability history mandate portion. So these are things that are actively underway here at Kane University, and that we hope more of our students and teachers will partake in. And this is really the perfect introduction for my friend and colleague, for the educator, Mary Sock, who is a teacher at Watchung Hills Secondary School, as well as the former president of the Diversity Council.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here tonight. Thank you, Senator Lesniak. Thank you, Dr. Goldberg. I feel a lot of attention has been on education. So I am prepared here to talk about specifically from my experiences in the classroom. But as an educator, I reflect on what kind of student do I want to create. I want to create a student that has critical thinking skills, right? That is smart, that is talented, that is going to excel in their work world. I want to create students that have knowledge, skills, attitudes to be able to function through diverse racial, ethnic, gender, religious groups. And I want my students to be upstanders. I want them to be able to find their own voice, be comfortable in who they are, because part of high school is a discovery of your own identity, and helping kids find their voice to be an ally and an advocate to others, and be able to empower students to stand up for themselves. So, how do we do this? I teach primarily world history, and my curriculum is structured regionally. So we start off the beginning of the year with kind of a basic terminology that we are going to use for the entire year. We talk about ethnocentrism. We watch Chimamanda Adichie's The Danger of a Single Story and what that means to stereotype. We look at photographs of million-dollar houses on the continent of Africa. Nobody will guess that it's on that continent. And we talk about why is that? When we talk about identity, kids have to fill in an identity chart, which is very difficult for them to actually, they write about themselves. They'll take 1,000 pictures of themselves, but when it comes to really sharing personal information, that's sometimes difficult for them to do, and self-analyzing. We'll talk about we and they, how those groups, how we see those groups in history and how they manifest themselves in both positive and negative ways. So with that framework, we begin our units of study. And one of the most powerful things I think that we do in the beginning of the year is I have the students write down 3 of the worst things that have ever been said about them. Curse words, anything else, so that gives them some freedom, no holds barred. They write them on a piece of paper, we put them in a big pot, they put their head down on the desk, and I read them out. You know, one by one, we throw them in the garbage after it, and there's similarities, as you can guess, what many of the females have been called, what many of the males have been called. But 2 years ago, the last one I read out was a nobody. And even the kids in the class were like, oh, that hurt. And we talked about, you know, that we use words every day. And all of us have been called really terrible things. And we have probably used those words to refer to other groups. And we talk about what choices that we make. We look at the choices as facing history, the choices that people make in history, and then the choices that students make in their own lives, right? And you couple that with the Eleanor Roosevelt quote, like, where do human rights begin? In places so close to home, that our interactions, where we interact with others, have meaning. And we carry these themes throughout the year, whether it be talking about anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, right? So we start with history, we talk about the historic context, but then we bring it down to the level of the students, because the stories are what are important. The stories resonate, right? Stories impact hearts, hearts impact minds. And when you can create the classroom climate where students themselves feel comfortable sharing their own personal stories, whether it be about gender, about race, about ethnicity, or stories from their family, and the kids have a direct connection, that is really what has an impact and can really move kids and change their mind. But these conversations are critical. And I think it's really important that they take place in the classroom where teachers can help them have these conversations. Because if we're not answering these questions, they're not being answered, or they're asking their friends who might not be an expert, or they're going online, and we know they really don't critically analyze the websites that they're on. They're just filling it in with their own information. So these courageous conversations, and sometimes I'll have students just write questions on a piece of paper if they're too embarrassed to ask, if they're not sure, and we'll pull out questions and have a conversation. But I think these conversations are important. And not only with that, of knowing the history, talking about just the level of personally of how it impacts them, the most important part is that social justice part. So what do you do with this information, right? How can I use my voice to make a difference? How can I be an upstander? There were 2 students from our schools that had the word added to the dictionary. They had this petition on change.org. So our school takes great pride in this word of creating a culture of upstanders in our school. So how do you use that voice? How do you use that voice to participate in democracy? And that is the critical part of it. We can teach them about the history, whether it's the stories, the humanity, the I see you part of it, the connection. using your voice to be an ally and advocate for others, to be the change that they want to see in the world. Like when we talk about movements and history of Martin Luther King and Gandhi, we say to the kids, like, you don't have to be that person. But there were thousands of people whose stories might have gone unrecorded in history, but their small acts of standing up all contributed to this cause. So I say to them, how can we aspire to be that way? And then how can you also inspire others and recognize the power that individuals and students have in themselves to make a change? And when they believe it and do it, kids can do absolutely amazing things. I have taught some incredibly wonderful, brilliant, amazing kids. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. And I also just want to take one moment to recognize we have one of our other teachers here. Tonight we have Franklin Stebbins over there, who's also very much involved in the council.
An amazing teacher.
Yes. So I just wanted to say that he's not on the panel, but still deserves recognition and the important work that Mary's been doing. He's been replicating in his own classroom. So thank you. It's now my pleasure to introduce Stephen Goldstein, who is the former executive director of Garden State Equality and the Anne Frank Center for Mutual Respect.
Thank you, Dr. Goldberg. Everyone, 90 minutes of speeches, really great ones. I want to talk to you, the students of Kean University, without a speech, with very specific suggestions as to how you can go out there and stop hate every day of your lives. First, let me be brutal. I have had the shit kicked out of me because I am Jewish. I'm also studying to be a rabbi, and somewhere in the Talmud, I bet it let me say that word. From 2004, when I founded Garden State Equality, through 2013, when we won marriage equality in the state of New Jersey, with the extraordinary championing of Senator Lesniak, with Senator Greenstein. Every single day that I fought for marriage equality, I faced hatred from the extreme right wing. It wasn't the hatred that you might think. Not once during my 9.5 years leading Garden State Equality did I face an anti-LGBT remark. Countless times I was attacked because I was Jewish right here in New Jersey. I wasn't even lobbying as a Jewish leader. My role as Garden State Equality chair, founder, and executive director was to lobby for marriage equality and LGBTQ rights, particularly when I went to parts of New Jersey, not close to here, when I went to Ocean County, Atlantic County, Cumberland County. When I went to those counties, and I lobbied for gay rights and for rights for the entire LGBT community, what did I hear when people wanted to attack me? I heard these words often. Go back to New York, where you belong. Go back to Russia, where you belong. Go back to Israel, where you belong. When people wanted to fight dirty and stab me in the heart for fighting for gay rights, they didn't attack me because I was a member of the LGBT community. They attacked me because I'm a loud and proud Jew, just like everybody should be loud and proud of the person they are and the community they come from. We have a problem here in New Jersey. It is not true that everything is okay. Nothing is okay when it comes to the growth of hatred in America against the Jewish people, against Muslim people, against people of color, against women. It is growing. It is an epidemic. It is a danger. Now, let me tell you something. You see anti-Semitism every day, usually on social media, even if you don't realize it. Let me give you some examples. Intersectionality. Well, we talk a lot about that word. We've heard that buzzword, jargon word today. We all believe in intersectionality, or so we think. Intersectionality is when we in oppressed communities make a vow to one another that we will fight for all other communities as if it's our own. I see every community mentioned as an oppressed community, but rarely the Jewish community. It is time to call it like it is. I, as a Jewish leader, fight every single day for the dignity and equality of every other community. Rarely do I see that paid back in kind, with one exception. You are all representatives of oppressed communities who do fight against anti-Semitism. One exception. There's been one community that has stood by the Jewish community through thick and thin as our sisters and brothers. That's the Muslim community. And I as a descendant of Ibrahim and Abraham, am deeply grateful to my Muslim sisters and brothers. I wish other communities did the same. Intersectionality means that I fight against Islamophobia and I fight against the refugee ban as much as I fight against anti-Semitism, and I know my Muslim sisters and brothers would do the same for me, and everybody at this table should do the same for each other. And let me tell you something. Intersectionality is a bunch of crap if you make exceptions, if you don't include every single community that is oppressed. You are full of garbage if you say you believe in intersectionality. You either stand up for the rights of every community and make no exception, or get the hell off the stage. You're no civil rights leader. Now, on social media, there's this horrible habit. Do you ever see people single out some really bad people, some criminals, some terrorists, and others say, oh, it's just like the Jewish community, just because so-and-so one person is prejudiced. Oh, it's just like the Muslim community to be terrorists because this one person did something wrong. Folks, every single community has bad people, okay? Every community. You can't make generalizations. Do me a favor. Here's how you stop hatred right now. Whenever you see somebody using one incident of one bad person committing a crime or act of hatred and say, you see, you call them on it. Particularly it hurts me when I look at the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. I see people who side with Israel say, oh, did you see what the Palestinian did? I see people sided with the Palestinian side. Did you see what the Israeli did? You can't judge people by the bad apples in every single group. The pastor Kirster Stendahl, he was a former professor at Harvard, one of the great theologians of our time, said, don't compare your best with any other group's worst. That's not right. That's not fair. By the same token, don't define any other group's history. I deeply respect the history of oppression as African Americans define it, as Muslims define it, as women define it. It is not my place as a member not of those communities to tell people their history is wrong. I embrace people because I embrace their self-concepts of history. That's what you need to respect on social media. Finally, I don't want to take too much time here, folks, but I want to talk to you about the expression, never again. It's becoming an empty slogan, and that is a danger to humanity. Never again means nothing without action. the enemy of never again, the enemy of embrace and tolerance and love of every oppressed community is our refusal to get involved. The enemy of never again is isolationism. When people say the United States should not get involved in other parts of the world where people are killing each other in genocides, not to get involved, that's not never again, that's begging for once again. Here's some controversy. Military might is a last resort, but it is a tool that the United States has not used responsibly. We have consistently sided with dictatorships and the progenitors of genocide. But Muslims are getting killed all over China, and LGBT people are getting killed all over Chechnya. And African Americans continue in de facto slavery in countries all over the world, including our own country. And Jews are getting killed left and right because of the President of the United States we now have. We have to get involved to stop the hatred. Saying I don't want to get involved, saying I want to put America first, means you put human rights last. That has got to end now, and you can end it now by making that call on Facebook. Finally, I want to leave you with two words. Those two words are called holy envy. I'm in rabbinical school right now, and holy envy is a term that we learn. And holy envy means this, and you do not have to be religious, you don't have to be a member of an organized religion. You could be atheist, you could be agnostic, just have a value system as you listen to this, okay? Holy envy means that you can find something good in every faith that is not your own. I can find something good in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, in a Baptist church. I can find something good in Christian churches, in mosques. We can learn from one another. No religion has a secret and superior pathway to God. Nobody is God except God. So for all of us, learn holy envy. Find a way to respect and find goodness in other religions. Find a way to have theological modesty. None of us is superior. And post these things on social media every day and call people out in their tracks immediately, right on the spot when you see hatred. And that's how we'll build another world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now for the final panelist of the evening, I'd like to invite Randy Bergman, who is the coordinator of Project Unity, to speak about the really important interfaith work happening down around Lakewood and Toms River.
Thank you very much. I should point out that my role in Unity Project is part-time. My full-time job is as the editorial page editor of the Asbury Park. I've got a very big forum that I can use that gives me a huge advantage, I think, in trying to improve relations. Our focus is on the Orthodox and non-Orthodox and the friction in the Lakewood area, which I consider ground zero for that kind of friction in New Jersey. The Unity Project originated when I held listening sessions, which we do from time to time just to get people to come and air their gripes or complaints about the paper, suggestions for improving it. And the first two, there was a common theme that we've got a real problem here with bias in the Asbury Park press. And there was some truth to that. I acknowledge there were a lot of negative stories coming out of the press for a variety of reasons. And so at the last listening session I held, There were 3 women there. This was in Toms River, which is one of the neighboring towns in Lakewood, Jackson being another one where there are real issues. And the woman started spouting all the usual tropes about the Orthodox. It was really disheartening to hear them. About 10 minutes into the meeting, an Orthodox woman walked in, young, well-dressed, totally unstereotypical of what these women, I think, would imagine. She was an entrepreneur, college graduate, very well-spoken, Orthodox, not an ultra-Orthodox, not Hasidic. But she spoke for about 10 minutes or so and gave her story, and these other 3 women just sat there in stony silence. They were just amazed. And after that meeting, I got in touch with her and asked her if we could have some more conversations with the Orthodox community. She happily agreed to do that. We subsequently held about 3 or 4 meetings where we had probably 20 or 25 people in the room just talking about their concerns. And out of that, we decided to create a steering committee that now consists of 5 Orthodox members, 5 non-Orthodox members. I am not Orthodox, I'm a Protestant, but the committee is equally divided. And clearly we saw this as an issue that really needed to be addressed. And there's no question that in our area that is the big issue, is relations between the Orthodox and the non-Orthodox. Primarily because Lakewood, which is now majority Orthodox, is running out of room, and there are a lot of people now who are moving into the adjacent communities, particularly Jackson and Toms River, which have a lot of working class people in them. There's a history of bigotry, particularly in Jackson, and the fact that the Orthodox are starting to move in has created some real flashpoints. Right now, I would say there are probably about maybe 1,200 Orthodox in Jackson and maybe another 1,500 or so in Toms River. So what we've decided to do, and it's interesting tonight to hear, you know, kind of the points of emphasis about education, face-to-face contact, interaction, and those are really kind of our guiding principles in terms of what we're trying to do to improve things. We focus on events that are aimed at getting Orthodox and non-Orthodox to meet together. We've had holibakes, we've had craft fairs where we've had Orthodox and non-Orthodox, you know, getting together. It's a great place, a great way to get people to meet. We've got a bunch of ideas. Next week we have another steering committee meeting, and we're going to establish a set of goals for the year. It's a very ambitious agenda, and I think it's going to work. Our steering committee has attracted a lot of interest amongst the leadership in those towns, Orthodox and non-Orthodox. And one thing we had to overcome early on was to try and regain the trust of the Orthodox community, which was not easy to do. But I do believe that we've done that partly due to my colleague, Gustavo Martinez, who is a reporter in Lakewood, joined us 6 months ago. He's done a tremendous job. He gets out to all these events. I'm thrilled to death that he's here tonight. But we have turned things around in terms of the perception of the newspaper, and I think that was really the first thing we had to achieve. So now we've got buy-in from the leadership in Lakewood and beyond, and everyone's collaborating with us. We're talking about having a community garden. We've gotten Georgian Court University involved, Beth Midrash Gavoha, which is the Jewish college, probably the second largest in the world, I think. They're right down the street from each other, so it's a really wonderful opportunity, I think, for them to start taking the lead on improving relations. We're also planning a concert by a musician named Shalem Lemmer. Some of you may have heard of him. He's the first Orthodox Jew to have received a major record contract. He's absolutely tremendous. So we're planning to book him at the Asbury Hotel and try and get a good mixed audience for that. Education is very important to us, and I'm thrilled to death that I've been invited here tonight. I just got into contact with Ms. Goldberg 2 weeks ago, I think it was, A member of my steering committee apparently put her in touch with me, and she's going to help us try and get into the schools down in Jackson and Toms River in particular, which we've been trying to infiltrate for quite some time without success. So I'm very optimistic about that. We're also interested in educating adults. They're a big part of the problem, obviously, and we do that through the newspaper. We have a section, Unity Project section, where we archive all of our articles that are related to Orthodox issues. A lot of it's educational. Today, I was thrilled to death to get permission to use excerpts from a book on Orthodox Judaism that's distributed to law enforcement officials and to religious groups, healthcare providers, and others that basically tries to educate them about certain issues and rituals involving the Orthodox. It's got a wonderful Q&A section, so we're basically going to put out 5 different things a week on our website to try and give people a better understanding. And so I'm very, very optimistic. I wasn't probably about a year ago. This project officially kicked off in the summer. We had been planning probably for 2 or 3 months in advance of that, but we've only been at it for about 7 months. It got off to what I thought was a bit of a slow start, but I'm very optimistic that we're really going to make a major difference. And I think that's where it has to happen, is at the community level, through education and through getting Orthodox and non-Orthodox to physically meet each other. I grew up in Westfield, which has, you know, a significant Jewish population, but not Orthodox so much. And when I met some of these Orthodox people for the first time, it was really my first opportunity to get to know them as individuals, and it really changed my mindset a lot. And I think that's really what we need to do, is to get people together physically, and that's one of our major goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think I'm overwhelmed right now by the ideas, the values in the room, and also for students to hear the variety of ways that you can enact change from exactly where you are. You could be the Attorney General one day, but you do not need to be the Attorney General to take action and enact change. And so now we've reached the portion of the evening where we have an opportunity for discussion and some questions, with the goal being, how are we going to move this pledge forward? We've all taken the pledge. What are we going to do so that it doesn't simply remain on this beautiful table? And so action, action, action. What are you doing? What would you like to see happening? What I'm going to ask is that anybody who has a question, if you are sitting around the table, please turn the mic on just by pressing the button. If there is a panelist that would like to respond, or if it's a direct question, I ask you to keep your comments brief, just so we can have an opportunity to hear from many people in the group. So what I'd like to begin with first is I'm going to put a student on the spot, Mahida, because I think we need to hear a student's voice. So, Mahida.
Okay, so one of the activities that I was introduced to by Ms. Adar. Yeah. Okay, so my name is Mahida Kamal, and I'm a student here at Kane University, and I was invited by Ms. Adara Goldberg to speak here about the importance of combating discrimination. So one of the activities that was given to us by her was the Just Because activity, and within that we were supposed to take stereotypes that are labeled to us or that we hear all the time and say that we are not them. So for example, for myself, I've said that just because I am Muslim, I am not a terrorist. I am kind and compassionate. And we went around the room and we all said something, and it was just interesting to hear what other people had to say. And it's said to us so often that we become desensitized to it, and it was important to hear like what other people go through, and it's important to understand that different people come from different backgrounds and different cultures, and it's unfair to assume that all these people are like, we're all different, and we should be able to be open-minded, and with being open-minded, you should be caring and compassionate, and we need to learn about empathy. And for everyone to be caring, compassionate, and have empathy, that leads to, like, if one person does it, then other people see it, and that's a learned behavior, and when everyone does it, then it does lead to combating discrimination.
Does anybody else in the group? Perfect.
Hello, my name is Siobhan Williams. I'm the Vice President of the United Nations Association at Kane University. I first would like to thank Stephen Goldstein and Alicia DiLorenzo. I really loved what you guys had to say. I had the pleasure of taking Facing History in Ourselves when I was in high school. So my teacher, he brought up James Baldwin, and I really liked to resonate with him. And he said that the first time he knew that he needed to start making action plans was when he got to learn about the Holocaust. He saw that there were a lot of similarities between the hatred of African Americans and the anti-Semitism of the Jews during the Holocaust. So I would like to thank you, and we would love to partner or have you talk to more of our members, because I think that that's very important. I really love the word that you brought up, desensitized. I think a lot of college students are desensitized to the atrocities that happen around them, and they don't really understand what's going on. And I just would like to ask how you think that, from a college standpoint, like I took Facing History in Ourselves, but what do you do after that? Like, how do you continue that as you go into college and you try to implement that at your university? And what can we do to get more college students involved, and how would you all like to help college students?
Hello, I'm Frank Stebbins from Facing History and Ourselves, and I really appreciate your comments. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Facing History and Ourselves is a nonprofit organization that works with educators on providing educators and students with tools to combat bias and hate. And before I talk about that, I'd really like us to pause for a minute and think about, in our lives, in our moment of need, when we had a first preventer or when we had an upstander arrive at that moment. And I don't want us to focus on what that moment was, but I want us to focus on that individual. And I think that's at the core, to answer your question of what we can do at colleges and in schools as general. How much do we need those first preventers, those upstanders, not just in our classrooms, but in the hallways of schools, in our communities? And I think that's a key component of, as we leave high school, but carrying on to higher education as well. And I think it's the approach that you probably were familiar with Facing History, that it's not just about intellectual rigor, it's about coupling that with emotional engagement and ethical reflection in the hopes that a sense of civic agency is formed. And that doesn't go away once the bell rings and you leave a classroom. So I think as we're surrounded by the pledge tonight, it's a perfect opportunity to kind of echo what you just said, that yes, we all have the choice to be bystanders, but we all have the power to be upstanders and first preventers. And I think that if we keep that in mind along with the pledge and continue to bring these conversations to educators and amazing students like yourselves, that's the first step in accomplishing what you just asked.
I'm Susan Polerstock. I'm a professor of special education here at Kane University. And I want to thank you for what you just said. Your comment was wonderful. Our students are articulate, committed, caring. We have a course, ID 1800, Holocaust and Genocide Studies. It's a wonderful course. It's an interdisciplinary course. We need to get students interested and enrolled, and that will begin a conversation and then a relationship with the Holocaust Resource Center. And there are plenty of just causes that we need to get behind and support, so thank you.
Hi, I just want to thank everybody for being here. My name is Hassan Tariq. I'm the president of the United Nations Association. And a lot of people spoke today, and I'll be honest, every word resonated with me. And when I say every word, I truly mean it. Being a Muslim, I've seen it, it's happened to me. I've been called a terrorist plenty of times. And I've seen my friends get discriminated against, and I've seen people get discriminated against. And coming together in a place where different communities can talk about issues like this is truly important for us to have better progress when it comes to cross-cultural communication and understanding each other. And not just understanding each other in a way where, okay, we can understand the problems that someone goes through, but understanding why are these problems coming in the first place? Understanding why are these issues happening now? And I just want to thank everybody, again, for giving us students, and saying the words you're saying resonates with us students, because it gets a little disheartening when you see things and you're trying to make a difference, and sometimes the action is taking slower than usual. And my question to you guys is, how can we better communicate with communities that feel like they're alone, or better communicate with communities or people in general that feel like they don't have their voice heard? As president of the United Nations Association, my goal is to work with different communities around Kane University, and not just our association. And I just want to know, how can we communicate with people and communities that feel like they're not being represented perfectly enough? Thank you.
But I know a lot of colleges have those, and that really is their goal. You know, you take a place like Princeton University, for instance, which is about as diverse a campus as you can find. You know, there are all sorts of organizations that are really focused on that, and I would just suggest that you take advantage of the publications that are available at Kane, and try and, you know, start an organization specifically for that purpose. I think there would be a lot of interest in it.
So I want to speak to both of your questions. And I think that it can become overwhelming to consider what large we need to do in order to create change and move the needle. But I want you to consider, just as I asked earlier, for us to consider one interaction after the next coming from compassion. Like the very next interaction that you have with the very next person that you make eye contact with, how do you embody compassion? And I think that takes a little bit of the overwhelming feeling away from it, to consider that we have power in one moment after the next, after the next, after the next. And I'd be happy to chat more afterwards, but as a starting place.
Who else has a question? Oh, please.
What I do. You know, my parents, my grandparents emigrated here from Poland, and my parents did not want me to speak Polish. You know, they were embarrassed, and as a result of that, I never learned other languages. But in my later years, I studied French. Hablo ahora español. Je parle français. And just so I can communicate with someone with just a few words to say that we're together. We're not separate from each other. When I see somebody with a Muslim name, Assalamu alaikum, Shalom. If we just by communicating, there was this guy, I recognized his accent. It was the Eastern European accent. And he opened up the door for me, and I said, Dziękuję bardzo. And you could see he just lit up. So it's just the little thing, little gestures with people as you pass by as strangers you'll never see again, just goes so far to interconnect each other.
Well, I was just going to mention that education has come up, and I appreciate your work that you're doing with your students. As a part of the effort to introduce the pledge into the educational community, we have been working on trying to get schools to adopt the pledge as a tool as part of their anti-bullying programs. And the first school system at this point, the only full school system that has actually adopted it, is the Franklin Township School System. The superintendent of schools happened to be at an event, Martin Luther King breakfast, 2 years ago, and heard me speak about the pledge and came over and said, I want to do it for my school. So it was quite an amazing event where every child, every member of the staff, president of the board, other members came and stood at 10 a.m. on Valentine's Day that year to take the pledge. And you can find the video of that on our website. And I think that's it. So we've been working actually with public officials to try to get the Department of Education, for the State Department of Education, to encourage, they say they can't dictate it to the school system, but to at least encourage them to adopt it. So if you have an influence working with your school system, let us know. We'll be happy to come and speak to them and encourage them to adopt the pledge as one of the tools that they can use. As to working with communities that feel unrepresented or not heard, I think anytime something, well, first of all, we have found ourselves reacting to these incidents of violence against Jews, against Muslims, against blacks, against others, and so forth. And in this experience, certainly in the last few years, myself and many folks who are working with me on this initiative have realized that this is not something we should do only when there is something bad happens. We need to take initiatives to actually proactively get the communities together. And by the grace of God, there are two major events now happening in Morris County and Somerset County. A group actually called me after one of these vigils. After Pittsburgh had happened, we had a huge vigil at the Temple Bethel in Hillsborough. We had, on a rainy night, we had over 300 people on a 1.5 day notice. And people then came out afterwards and saying, this is not the only thing we should be doing. We need to get to know each other. And I think the real essence is, the value of this work really is, get to know the other individuals, get to know them as human beings. And so there are activities now going on in Morris County. Diversity Day initiative has started 2 years ago. In Somerset County, there's a group that is going to be organized, just a social event. Just come together from different communities, meet each other, share each other's food, and get to know each other. And then have ongoing conversation with that. So I think one of the things that I have also found very effective, part of the other work that I try to do is I teach a course at Rutgers, a non-credit course on understanding Islam and Muslims. And part of that course is to actually invite my students to a mosque. So the whole session is held when I don't give a lecture. They simply come and observe the prayer. They listen to the call to prayer. They then have an opportunity to observe the actual prayer. They're sitting right in the middle of the place where the prayer is taking place. They hear the Jummah khutbah, the sermon. And afterward, they spent almost 2 to 2.5 hours, that people generally don't even want to leave, the discussion with the imam. And frequently the principal of the school that they have associated with that mosque. And that, people have told me, that is one of their best experiences of learning about each other, is actually being in a mosque, learning and talking about others, and seeing what a mosque really is. So I think one thing you could do is arrange mosque visits. I offer that as an opportunity, by the way, for confirmation classes. Anybody who wants to visit a mosque, let me know where you live and we'll arrange one for you. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you for your insightful comments. One of the things that we do have in our school is a diversity focus group, which is made up of a diverse group of students. We have a diversity club, and they meet on on a weekly basis. But they usually meet about once a month, and they just met this Wednesday. So it's made up of a diverse group of kids in the school, and essentially they're the word on the street. So we solicit information from them and then have a conversation with the curriculum director, with the administration. Like, these are what the kids are hearing. This is what the kids are feeling. You know, what kind of changes we need to make. What do we need to address in the classroom? Is it something related to Islamophobia? How do we address that? We also have, like, the diversity club members go into the freshman classes and teach different lessons. So one of them is on Islamophobia, one is on systemic racism as well, so we can have these conversations. And it's really important for us to hit the freshmen, because that is the most amount of immaturity, and you'll have them then for the next 4 years, hopefully, to shape in a positive direction. I mean, a lot of what I deal with in the interactions with kids is a lot of the jokes. It's a joke, but it's not a joke, and it's offensive joke, and unpacking how to handle that, how you would handle that when somebody says something. We call it woulda, shoulda, coulda. You know, it happens. I don't say anything because I'm afraid. I had a student just write about this today. Like, who is Muslim. Like, I'm afraid to say something because I feel that they're going to say something meaner back if I confront them. So to actually have that dialogue, please help me understand why you said that. You know, you didn't really mean to say that, did you? To give somebody the out. And then talk about it with kids. Like, some kids are confrontational, like, no, you can't say that. But most kids are not confrontational at all. So how do we work within our own personality to be able to address that? Am I the bridge builder? Am I the healer? Like, am I just going to not say anything but walk out and show my, disaffection, disapproval in that way? So it's working with the kids. There's a lot of trial and error and just scenarios, like, if this happened, what would you do? What could you do? But maybe a diversity focus group would be helpful. You're welcome.
Hi, I'm Laura Detchen. I'm a union resident, also a union school teacher at the middle school. I taught French for 30 years, and now I've created the leadership curriculum. I use Facing History a lot, so thank you. And I commend the students and the high school teachers, but I think middle school is also the time. I don't think it's too young. And if the students at Kane are looking for a community to reach out to and where to go to next, please start with ours. I know I have a lot of former students from Union that are going to Kane, and it's wonderful. You're my hope, and it's wonderful to hear that you want to make a difference and go forward, but I challenge you and I ask you to come back where you came from and go into your communities. And I'd love for you to come and speak to my middle school class. I'm sure wherever you went to middle school, they'd love to have you, and they really are going to listen to you. Kane offers so much. I know we're working currently with the Union High School, allowing them to come and take courses for credit here, and they have leadership conferences, which my middle school students will be coming to, but to have you actually go to their classroom and meet them where they are and hear from your experiences, the person you were in middle school, where you came from, and where you want to go now and how you want to make a difference. I truly think they would benefit from your voice. So I challenge you to not just go forward, but also look back and push them forward.
Yeah, so I just want to get a little clarification. As far as reaching out to individuals of students who may not who are feeling alienated or isolated, or who may not have had some sort of personal touch, as far as you're looking for recommendations or suggestions, I think social media obviously is a wonderful place to reach individuals who may not be, off social media, right? And I think developing initiatives and collaborations among diverse groups and then bringing it to the leadership of the school so that way there's buy-in from them, and then that can cascade down, because you might have a Twitter page or an Instagram or a Snapchat that that individual may not be looking at, but maybe they're looking at Kane University or the Lesniak Institute or another organization. So by fostering those cross-agency or cross-divisional or institutional collaborations to promote it is always a good way to reach people who sometimes aren't typically reachable. Another thing, and I don't mean to make light of the situation, but don't underestimate the power of food. The idea of people coming together over a shared communal meal that celebrates the history and the culture of a particular group through food has a deeply meaningful and powerful effect on individuals. I know it did for me. I got involved when I was actually first in high school and then in college, celebrating the rich diversity of my classmates. And it wasn't like a cultural fair that did it for me. It wasn't, a musician. It was food. And, and that was sort of the hook that got me in to learn about what became my Muslim friends, my Indian friends, my, Eastern European friends with some of the very interesting food that I had from, countries like Uzbekistan. It was fascinating. I make it a point in my work to meet with professionals, other community relations specialists, and I always do it over food. I don't like going to an office. I like going to a restaurant. I like inviting people to my home, whether it's to celebrate Shabbat at my house or a Jewish holiday, or to go to a friend or a colleague's home to celebrate their holidays, or to meet at restaurants like kosher delis, other restaurants around the state. I mean, one of the great things about New Jersey is we have amazing food and amazing restaurants that specialize in delicacies and cuisines from all over the world. And I try and take advantage of those as much as I can with my colleagues to learn more about the work that they're doing and engage, but also to eat and share a meal, because when you're sitting at the table at a restaurant, you're stuck there throughout the entire meal. So you have to talk. Otherwise, it's just like this really awkward meeting where you're not really doing anything. So never underestimate the power of food and bringing people together over a meal. It has a deeply profound and impactful. It's impactful for individuals.
Okay, is it on now? Yeah. I come from Hoboken in Jersey City a long time ago. I was there when it was very different, both of those towns. I taught in Hudson County for 7 years in various school systems. And in one of them, it was 1963 or 4, Cubans were coming in, as many of you know, and you know that, Senator. Castro, they were coming, they used to go, the kids, the boys, because Castro wanted the boys in his army. The parents got them out and sent them to Italy and Spain, and they had family in Hudson County. And Elizabeth, yes, but I didn't teach in Elizabeth. I don't want to mention the town I don't want to get sued, God forbid. That's what I worry about. So please, in this town, it was Polish, Irish, and Jewish. The stores on the main avenue were predominantly owned by Jews. I want to back up a little bit because I made some notes. There was an unwritten law in Hudson County that the Jews would not be in the politics, but they gave the money to the politicians. That was unwritten, and if Lowell Harwood was alive today, he would confirm it, because I used to talk with him a lot. He only lived 2 blocks from me in Jersey City. Well, there was dissension between the kids, and I used to, after lunch, when the children came back from outside, I would usually read them a chapter from Dickens or Twain, because I was a big person on literature, and I teach the literacy courses here in the juniors and graduate students. Well, one day at lunch, they came back and they were hot under the collar. There had been a big fight in the playground. I was on duty in the hallway. That was fine, but I knew something was up. And instead of reading to them, I did something that had not been done in this school system. Don't forget, this is the mid-'60s. We had a discussion. And the children said, they were both sixth graders, they can be very tough and they can be very blunt. And I like the bluntness and be truthful. Well, they said various things about my own people and about other groups. And I held back because I'm supposed to be the adult in the room and the moderator. And I heard some anti-Semitic words that I had never heard before. So it came out that the children, I said, where does it come from? Well, my father says this, and my mother says this, and my grandma. So I said, so where is it from? Now we're talking, and I'm getting back to here. We're talking about education in the schools. I think we have to do something with the parents. I don't know how. That's not my field. I don't know what to do, but I think the parents have got to be attended to. Number one. Number two, I live in Brooklyn now. I live in Bay Ridge. Any of you know Bay Ridge? You know. Then you know it's Muslim, and I love it. Fifth Avenue and Ramadan, everything is decorated. So, and I have my building, my apartment building is the United Nations. And I'm trying to get a bigger apartment because I really like it there. And I'm right near the Verrazano, 3 blocks away, so I zip in and I get here. And Shore Road, which I've gotten some tickets because I'm driving too fast. But seriously, I grew up in a very different time. I said this, I don't think you understand what I mean. Senator Lesniak would. On a Saturday night when my father was coming home from being a shoeman, Florsheim shoes in the Bronx, and my mother was outside, and the other women and men were sitting outside a hot summer day, and I lived between 2 taverns, both German. This is a family tavern, and over here was where the sailors came. So I'm talking about pre-World War II and beyond. We were kosher. We were religious. We were conservative. So we never ate there. As a matter of fact, I didn't get to the Camborth house until years later, and now it's closed. I brought some people there many years ago. Not a place that Jews went, not by my parents' standards or my mother's. Well, I went to Hebrew school, and I loved it because there were a lot of boys in the class and 4 girls. They were all preparing for their bar mitzvahs. But I couldn't have my bat mitzvah. We weren't allowed as women. I just had it in November in Brooklyn Heights, where my synagogue is. I've gone back to Hoboken and the United Synagogue of Hoboken on Garden Street and 2nd Street, 2nd and Garden. I've gone there for Shabbat occasionally, just to go home again, because I'm really there. I'm not here. And I don't know if those of you who are older, you'll understand. My mind is still back there in Hoboken and in Jersey City and what it was. Where those 3 Orthodox men, Orthodox, were killed, I know that street. Because it used to be, it's Van Nostrand Avenue, where my aunt and uncle, my mother's brother, and his wife had a house. And beyond that is that cemetery, etc. Martin Luther King Drive used to be Jackson Avenue. And we would go there on a Friday night or Saturday night and go shopping. My mother, we would take the bus into Jersey City from Hoboken. And it was a big deal. it's very different. And when I've come to Hoboken, Jersey City, out of the Holland Tunnel, I know how to go. I used to know how to go. But I want to get to Monticello Avenue. I got lost because of all the new apartment buildings.
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but you're gonna have to get to the point because we're ready to wrap up.
All right. I want to see something done with parents. I don't know what the deal is. I don't know what can be done, but they have to be part of this because of my experience in my teaching.
I hear you, and that's a good point. We've talked a lot about the youth, and we've talked about a lot about the importance of education, but also parents have to be educated too, because where do the children learn their
Correct.
prejudices and biases and bigotry from, but from their parents?
May I just say one more thing?
Sure.
I taught at night school, English as a second language in the high school, where I was teaching for a number of years. Well, I had no problem with the Latina, nor the only problem I had, truthfully, was with the Muslim men. They resented a woman.
Jim Maisha, one more thing. Please, we have to wrap up.
Okay, all I'm saying is that it was very difficult with them, and I hope that will change at some period. And
I'm sorry, Rabbi.
I would like to just say one thing relative to your comment. I think that it's the obligation of faith leaders, of leaders of all communities. So leaders in religious communities, leaders in communities of national orientation, LGBTQ plus community, whatever the community is, the leaders need to get people out to visit other communities. We need to cross borders. And unless we do that, we're not going to understand one another. And it's when we understand, you want the parents to make changes, they need to learn. And you learn by crossing borders. And Dr. Chaudhry is wonderful at doing that. And when we've had problems in the Jewish community, when the killings happened in Pittsburgh, when various things have happened, we're there for one another. That's a beautiful thing. That is how adults learn that we have allies, not enemies.
And I saw that, and I knew it was going to be bad. I knew it.
I actually want to call first on our freeholder, Al Mirabella, and I also want to call on you, Ayaz. I have a question for you. Pronounce your name right? Okay.
Thank you, Senator. So I appreciate being here and listening in the conversation. My wife is here. My son, Alex, is also here. And I'm the chairman of the Freeholder Board right here in Union County. I had the opportunity to take the pledge, and all the freeholders took the pledge with you, I think, in attendance, leading us several years ago. And I was very proud to reaffirm that tonight. And I think we'll do it again with the freeholders. We have a bunch of new freeholders that should do it too. I'll invite you. I will be happy to have you there. I had the opportunity, and my wife organized at Union County College, where she's on the faculty, she organized an LGBTQ series of events at the different campuses, and I had an opportunity to speak. And I used the term, we need to normalize acceptance. And I had such great faith that my kids were growing up in a world where they didn't see color, they didn't see religion or sexual orientation, and things kind of took a little left turn. I think the senator kind of mentioned that a little bit before. I don't disagree. So we need to continue to have forums like this. It's no surprise coming here that I expected to hear such passionate arguments on and points of view from the panelists, and the passion, the thoughtfulness. And it's certainly, Senator Lesniak, it's no surprise that you pull people together like this. I mean, you, in my mind, is the godfather of human rights in the state of New Jersey, and certainly a hero and a champion of mine. So I'm happy to be here and just participate and listen and take all the feedback so I can be a better person moving forward. So, and I appreciate the students, too, taking time out of their Thursday night to be here. They could be doing 20 other things, but you're here, and I appreciate you, too. Thank you.
Thank you, Freeholder. I want to mention a personal experience. Reverend.
Yes.
To you.
I'll try to be brief also.
We have a few more minutes, so don't worry about it.
Okay. I'm Howard Bryant. I am a Presbyterian minister, but I also work for the Union County Interfaith Coordinating Committee.
By the way, Reverend Brian is 91 years old.
Yeah. And I was really going to, if I was going to talk about when I was 12 years old. I was born in Oklahoma, and at 12 years, and my parents moved to California in 1942. And when I into high school, a couple, I was coming from high school, and a couple wanted me to go into a restaurant. It was a Jewish couple who wanted me to go there and to have a dessert. And the reason that they wanted to do that because they was demonstrated a racial prejudice even at 12 years old. I've got 21. I'm 91 now, but I could tell you a lot of stories. But the most important thing is that I'm a lover of God. I'm a lover of myself, and I'm a lover of my fellow human beings, and that's what I live by. And my motto is kill 'em with kindness. That's all.
You, Dr. Goldberg, you lost your moderator position when you left. But,
Hello, my name is Shanice Allen. You guys are all wonderful speakers. I want to first say that. I hold a bunch of hats on campus, but one that I'm very proud of holding here is being founder and president of CWG. And besides me is my co-founder and vice president, Ashley Winrow. The group is called Crown with Grace, and we created it to promote bringing together the community of young Black women on campus and extending a hand out to promote women of color to come together as well. So it goes back to Mr. Goldstein and his holy envy mention. The term, it applies to this because it's not a religious-based group, but it's about seeing the good in each community and hopefully understanding and embodying that compassion that you discussed before and allowing that to break down the boundaries or the prejudice that we have in our heads to, better lives and communities and schools and, interactions with each other. But I think the most important key component with all these ideas that we brought together is consistency in it. We have to be consistent to not normalizing the behaviors that we have that promote the bigotry and hate crimes that's happening today. We have to be consistent in keeping that community involved and interacting with each other. Because the moment we lose that consistency, the moment the momentum breaks is a moment where people believe that it was just a phase. It was just a trend for the moment. We'll get over it. Because time and time again, people come together just to disperse slowly. And if you want to have a movement, you have to keep it consistent. So that's all I want to say. Do you want to say anything real quick while we have them?
Just thank you all.
Yes, thank you for having us. Thank you.
thank you for being here. I'd like to mention one thing about seeing the good in everyone and seeing the good in and the best in our various different religions and heritage and heritages and experiences. I've spoken at many mosques, and Dr. Chaudhry, as you probably heard me say more than once, that I'm a Roman Catholic. And I admire the Muslim religion, Islam, so much because you fast for one entire month. And as a Roman Catholic, we have trouble not eating meat on Fridays. And also, Ayaz took me to a Muslim school on a Sunday afternoon. It was in spring. The sun was shining. I know I would have been out playing ball. And these young Muslim girls and boys, they were studying on a Sunday. So I just want to tell you how much I admire your commitment to education and your commitment to your religion.
Senator, may I just mention one thing? Since Ramadan has been mentioned a number of times, I was going to make a suggestion to my Muslim friends, and especially the students who spoke, that take advantage of the iftars during Ramadan. Invite people, open it up. And in fact, there are local mosques who will be opening every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. There will be an iftar taking place. If you can't organize it on the campus, invite your friends to the mosque. And I know there are people sitting right here from Union County, from Elizabeth, and in this area, who would welcome that. That's the again, picking up Josh's idea about using food as a means to connecting people. I think that's the best way to do that. So please take advantage of that.
My name is Ayaz Aslam. I'm with Muslim Community Center of Union County, as Dr. Chowdhury mentioned. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to invite the students to please join us anytime you like. We would love to have, especially on a Sunday, we have a Sunday school, we'd love to have you there. And we promise we will also arrange for spicy, traditional food so we can connect better. Just a quick comment. I think it's a great panel, and I think there's all individuals have some type of goals that they mentioned that they will try to achieve, and some organizations. And my apologies if I missed it, but I don't think I heard what we collectively will do moving forward. If I missed that, my apologies, but I just wanted to bring that up because I don't want to come here next year, go through the same thing again. I like to see what our 30-day, 60-day, 90-day goals are.
Perfect, and that's to be coming up on very shortly.
Yes, and I just have one more student who would like to speak.
Hello, my name is Patrick McEachern. I'm a senior here at Kane. Thanks for sharing your mic. Mine is missing for some reason. I'm the founder of PRISM, which is Kane University's LGBTQ organization on campus. And what a lot of you were saying tonight kind of resonates with one of the reasons that I started PRISM. Alicia, as you said before, one of your quotes was, "If I'm not seen, I don't exist." And when I came to Kane, I didn't see my community here. I didn't see that representation in the classrooms, in the curriculum, or even in the events that the school was having. So I took my own initiative and I decided to start my own organization on campus. And I feel that representation is an important part about education, because when it comes to representation, if you're not seen or if you're not seen by others, then I feel like people won't understand. Like the Attorney General said earlier, education is important, but connections make it better. Connections are what help us. And yes. Oh. Yes.
Okay.
But unfortunately, it didn't go. A lot of expression,
Yes. Thank you, Patrick. And we have one more.
Yeah.
In the back.
Before I give the mic to Caitlin, is this on? I'm pretty loud anyway. Hi, everyone. For those that don't know me, I'm Sarah. I'm the Assistant Director of the Holocaust Center here. Before I give the mic to our student, I just wanted to share briefly something that I found special besides all of the words from our panelist, moderator, Senator Lesniak, and distinguished guests, is that there are 2 Kane students in this room right now who went to the same high school. They took the same Holocaust and human behavior class in high school, and they are both at Kane University working on these initiatives, including human rights, Holocaust education, and they've never met. So it's because of this forum that they are together in the same room, and I hope afterwards they get a chance to meet one another and to share these initiatives and to bring that forward. So I'm going to give the mic to Caitlin now. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Caitlin. I'm a freshman here in Kane University, and I went to Bayonne High School. So yeah. I took the ID 1800 course in my high school with Mr. Woods. And while I have the microphone, I would just like to thank everyone in this room for being here. I think it's a profound honor that I'm able to hear so many people speak who are so passionate about stopping and combating anti-Semitism and spreading it awareness in schools, and not even in schools, but with parents too. And while we're on the topic, well, we're not, but with parents, I had something happen about a week ago with my mom. And I want to know what you all think about it, because you probably have a better answer than I did. We were watching the news, and there was recent talk of anti-Semitic hate going on in the community. And my mom turned to me and she asked me, why is this still happening? Why, after all these years, is there still so much hate towards these people? And I just looked at her and I had no explanation for it. I didn't know how to respond with what she was asking me. And I think it's so important that there are so many people in this room who are working towards spreading that answer, because I don't have it, and I still don't. So I'm very happy that I got some answers today. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think we're wrapping it up. We have a closing little bit of a program to take away as what we need to do next. And let me grab the microphone here. Okay, first of all, give Dr. Goldberg a great hand for being the moderator. She did a great job. And I want to thank all of our speakers, everyone here. As you said, Caitlin, Caitlin. No, that Caitlin. The passion that we have here, we will take into our communities, and we will make a difference. And I also want everyone here to give a shout out and a big hand to our staff and to the person who put this all together, the director of the Lesniak Institute, Sarah Mack. Give Sarah a big hand. So Sarah is going to take us out with the takeaway from all of what we talked about today, what you can do and must do to end hate and bigotry in America.
Thank you, Senator. So if you guys can look around on the TVs, we have some action items prepared for you. We don't want this event to start and end today. We want this movement to keep going, and today to be the push for all of you to be able to take this and bring it into the organizations that you represent. So the first action that we have on here is take the pledge. You've all already done that, so great job. The second thing on there is to invite people in your organization to take the pledge. Please, this is easy. Go back to the next meeting that you have with your organization, share this pledge with them, and have them take it. Now, the third thing that we can do, and we've been talking about social media a lot tonight, is let's put positivity in social media. Help us to track how many people are taking the pledge, and let's share it out to continue this movement to keep going. The last thing that we have on here is encourage others within your organization to introduce the pledge in their organization. So help it keep going forward. Now, the same link that you used to register for this event, we have now converted it into the base for this movement. This is where we'll track all of your pledges that you've signed. So please, as soon as you go home, go on there, write down that you've signed the pledge. And as you bring it to your organizations, take some pictures, share it on there, and help us to share it out. And this is how we'll keep the movement going, is with this pledge, and we'll keep spreading it along. So I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank you all for all of the great things that you've said. And I want to encourage you all to really keep this going, keep this fresh in your minds, and don't let it stop here. Thank you.
Dr. Goldberg, do you have anything final to say? I just put you on the spot.
I would really just like to thank the Senator, thank Sarah, thank our friends and colleagues who came out tonight. It's a very long day for most of you, and we appreciate your time and your energy and your expertise. And above all, I'd like to thank our students. They are the future. They are the ones who are going to move these action items far beyond anything that the rest of us will ever do. We are here for you. We are here to support you. We are here to champion you. And we are very, very excited to see how you're going to change the face of New Jersey and the United States. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Please keep up the good work. Stay in touch with our organizations and help yourself to refreshments.
Good night, everyone. Be well and God bless.